I was 11 years old when I learned that fear doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it wears a smile. It was my neighbor Timmy's birthday party. He was only 6 or 7, a scrawny kid with scraped knees who followed me around like I was a superhero. I didn't want to go. Parties for little kids were boring, and the noise always gave me a headache. But my parents had other plans. Date night. And since the party was right next door, they figured I'd be fine until they got back. "Just stay an hour," Mom said, handing me a wrapped present for Timmy. "We'll be back before the cake." I sighed and headed next door. The backyard was chaos. Kids yelling, an ugly bouncy castle, and worst of all, there was a pony. It was giving rides in slow circles while parents snapped pictures. I handed Timmy his gift, some dumb action figure he'd love, and hid away at the edge of the yard, away from the noise. That's when I noticed the clown. He stood near the snack table, his face an ugly mask of red paint and exaggerated features. His grin was scary, his eyes dark as night behind the smeared makeup, and he was staring right at me. Not at the kids, not at the parents, at me. I looked away, but every time I glanced back, his gaze was fixed on me, unblinking. My skin prickled. After 20 minutes, my head was pounding. The clown hadn't moved, just kept watching. I had the house key. Mom always made me carry it, and the thought of our quiet, empty living room was too tempting. No one would miss me. I slipped out the side gate and jogged home, locking the door behind me. I flopped onto the couch and turned on the TV, letting the mindless cartoons drown out the memory of that clown's stare. Then I heard it, a sound that made me jump. 3 sharp raps on the front door. My first thought was Mom and Dad, but then I remembered they had a key. They wouldn't knock. I muted the TV. The house was too quiet. Another knock. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. The clown stood on the porch. His painted face was inches from the door, with that wide, horrifying grin. Up close, I could see the sweat streaking his makeup, the way his chest rose and fell too fast, like he'd been running. I froze. He knocked again, harder this time. The door rattled. I didn't answer, didn't breathe. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, he tilted his head, as if he knew I was watching, and pressed his palm flat against the door. I stumbled back. I crouched behind the couch, my pulse pounding. The clown hadn't left. I could feel it. Then, movement. A shadow passed over the living room window. I risked a glance. The clown was there, his face pressed against the glass, his dark eyes scanning the room, looking for me. I ducked down, my breath coming in shallow gasps. A car engine rumbled outside, tires on gravel, my parents. I looked back at the window. The clown was gone. I never told my parents. When they walked in, I was on the couch like nothing had happened, the TV still blaring cartoons. They were too mad about me ditching the party to notice how hard my hands were shaking. "You can't just leave like that," Dad scolded. What if something had happened? I didn't answer. Because something had happened. And I still wonder all these years later, what would that clown have done if my parents hadn't come home when they did? Sometimes at night, I dream of his face in the window, and his grin grows wider every time. My mom hesitated at the front door, her suitcase in one hand and her car keys in the other. "You're sure you'll be okay?" I rolled my eyes. "Mom, I'm 14. It's 2 nights. I'll eat pizza, do my homework, and not burn the house down." She sighed. "Fine, but no friends over, and keep the doors locked." I nodded, already mentally planning the video game marathon I was going to have with my friends the second she left. Jake and Tyler came over that evening, just like we'd planned. We ordered 2 large pizzas, chugged sodas until our stomachs hurt, and played Call of Duty until our eyes were blurry. By midnight, they headed home, and I was alone in the quiet house. Too lazy to clean up the pizza boxes, I sprawled on the couch and flipped through TV channels. The house creaked in that way old houses do, but I wasn't scared. Not yet. Then I heard it, a scratching noise from outside the front door. At first, I thought it was a tree branch, but the sound was too deliberate. Scritch, 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 like something or someone was dragging a sharp object across the wood. I muted the TV. The living room had a large window that looked out onto the front porch. Heart pounding, I crept toward it and peered outside. A man was kneeling at the front door. He was filthy, his clothes ragged, his hair a tangled mess. In one hand, he clutched a butter knife, dragging it slowly across the door's surface, peeling off flecks of white paint. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He lifted the flakes to his mouth and licked them off his fingers like he was savoring the taste. My stomach twisted. What the hell? As if sensing my stare, his head snapped up. Our eyes met through the glass. His were bloodshot, pupils huge and black. His lips curled into a grin, revealing yellowed teeth. I ducked down, my breath coming in short gasps. Did he see me? For a few seconds, there was silence. Then, bam! The entire door shuddered as he slammed his shoulder into it, trying to break it down. I scrambled backward, nearly tripping over the coffee table as I lunged for my phone. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial. 911, what's your emergency? There's a guy. He's trying to break into my house. My voice cracked. Another bam against the door. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I hid in the pantry, listening as the man outside grunted and threw himself against the door again and again. Then, suddenly, the noise stopped. Sirens wailed in the distance. The police found scratches on the door and flakes of paint scattered on the porch. But the man was gone. My mom came home that night, her business trip cut short. She didn't even yell at me for having friends over. She just held me tight, her hands trembling. I never stayed home alone again after that, not until I turned 18. Even now, years later, I can't look at a butter knife without remembering the sound of paint being scraped away and the way that man licked his fingers clean. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if the door hadn't held. I should have trusted my gut about the neighbor from the start. His name was Mr. Vic, and he lived alone in the apartment next to mine, a gaunt, greasy-haired man in his late 40s who always wore the same stained flannel shirt. My roommates and I called him the creep behind his back, though we never said it to his face. There was something about the way he stared, too long, too unblinking, that made the back of my neck prickle. That's why, when my roommates left for the weekend and I found myself alone in the apartment, I double-checked the locks. It started just before midnight. I was hunched over my biology textbook, highlighter in hand, when the noise began, a loud, grating whir from the other side of the wall. Vacuuming. At midnight, I groaned. Of course it was Mr. Vic. Who else would be cleaning at this hour? I tried to ignore it, but the sound was relentless. 10 minutes passed, then 20. My patience was running out. Finally, I snapped. Instead of risking a face-to-face confrontation, I slammed my fist against the shared wall 3 times. Bang! 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 The vacuum stopped. Silence. I turned back to my notes. Then, a knock at my front door. My stomach dropped. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Mr. Vick stood on the other side, his face twisted in fury. His fists were clenched, his shoulders tense. But the second he noticed me watching, his expression shifted. His lips stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. Too many teeth, too much gum. Can I help you? I called through the door, not daring to open it. His voice was eerily calm. Can I come inside? We need to talk. Yeah, no way in hell, I thought. I'm busy, I told him. Not available. His smile didn't falter. Then, bam! He kicked the door so hard the frame shuddered. For a heartbeat, we stood frozen, me on one side of the door, him on the other, his grin still plastered on his face like a mask. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his apartment. The rest of the night was dead silent. No more vacuuming, no more knocks. But I didn't sleep. I moved out 4 months later, the day my lease ended. My roommates thought I was overreacting. Then again, they never saw that smile.